Right, so I'm just going to look a bit further into this ChatGPT with Python, and so we ran our code and we got some code working, and I've got it all up here again, and we've got two files. We remember we've got a private key as well, so we're going to go through that in part of this documentation or this look through. So let's just have a look, and if I just click on that and go back to it over here, we have this is the actual documentation itself. And if we scroll up to the top, so I'm at the top here where the introduction is, we've got two different ways of doing this. We've got Python binding, so the official Python binding, so pip install openai, and that's what we would have typed into our command prompt. If I put it over here down there, we did the pip. Oops, let's just delete all of these. Pip install. In fact, I could just do a copy and paste of it, which is this part here, so it's copied, and a pip install of openai down the bottom. But I'd already had that installed, but you would need to do that in order to get it running. And you can see all of the site packages and everything goes there. This also works for Node.js, so there's a Node.js library in the same way, and it's an npm install openai, which you do exactly in the same way with Node installed in. You can literally copy the code, copy that little clip it and paste it in. And then there's a part that refers to the you need to do authentication. So this module requires you to have signed into the website and be a user of the website and get an API key. And the way that you get your API keys, you can visit the API keys page to retrieve the API key that you're going to use in your requests. So open link in a new tab, and that's kind of like you'd have to sign up and sign in and get your API key. And back at the top is where the API reference was, so we're sort of like back where we were. So I'll close that. Let's assume that you've got your API key. Remember that your API key is secret, so and that's in big and bold there. Do not share it with any other users or expose it in any client-side code browser apps. And so forth. So like just keep it a secret. The way that I've just done it for the purpose of this example here is I've stuck it in this particular file, but the actual right way or a different type of way of doing it is putting it into the environment variables in your system, which you can do as well. So just going back to that, assuming now you've got the API key, there's some code here, but I think this one actually required the environment variables version. So I tried to run that before and create a video, but it failed miserably because I'm just literally importing the string itself from the my key file that I've created over here on the side. So anyway, just going down, we've got a method to make requests in some kind of way, and then we've got models. And one of the things that I looked at, and also we get this response back, and the question is what type of response do we get back? And it looks like it's a JSON file. So I'll actually run it, and then I will move back into this API reference, because then we can sort of like do a cross comparison. So this was a code, and we asked this one question, which is write a function that takes a list of integers and returns the sum of the even numbers in the list. And then I've actually specified here using the correct indentation, because sometimes it does or doesn't do it in Python. And I'll run the code just as it is, and this time I'm going to run it in the interactive Python, just because it might be a bit clearer. Let's just run that, importing the my key. And it's running the code. It's probably gone to do the query, and this time actually, funnily enough, it hasn't done the indentation which we wanted to, so this would all normally be indented. So slightly disappointing. Maybe I'll add a little bit in, something like please indent the loop the function properly. Right, let's try and run that again. I've never done this live actually, so let's have a look and see what happens. No, it doesn't indent the function properly a second time, which is it did do in other runs, and it's a bit random, and actually sometimes as well it gives you back a slightly different result too. Maybe if I change the temperature on there, because these are some of the parameters. I'll just have one go at that, and I will remove this please indent thing and run it. like that. We'll have one more attempt, and then anyway we'll go through the code. So no, the indentation doesn't come in, so it's something that you're going to need to do in some way, or figure that out, or ask the question in a different way such that indentation is done properly. And maybe it's a case that this isn't catching, or the indentation is done with tabs and Python wouldn't catch tabs, so just something to be aware of. But let's just go back. And we're getting this kind of JSON object, or something that's coming out of the file. It looks JSON-like, and also there is all of the arguments that go in, and you'll see that some of these arguments, I don't see the engine one being in there, but I see, for example, max tokens, which is over here. So we've got max tokens, and that was on line number 22 of our code. I mean, that was one of the other things that I actually had changed. So maybe if I go back to 1024, I don't know if this will or won't have an effect. No, it didn't have an effect in particular. But you've got max tokens, and it tells you how it's used. The token count of your prompt plus max tokens cannot exceed the model's context length, and most models have a context length of 2048 tokens. We've got 1000. I've just changed it back down to 1024 tokens. So that's that parameter. Then there's another parameter here, which is temperature. And what does temperature do? The temperature one is a bit more telling or descriptive, in the sense that, so it's a number, it defaults to number 1, but it's optional. So if you don't have it in there, then it will automatically default to number 1. What sampling temperature to use? It's a number between 0 and 2. Higher values like 0.8. So that's suggesting that 1 is already kind of like highish, according to this documentation. So 0.8 will make the output more random, while lower values will make it more focused and deterministic. So let's make it just, I don't know, like let's just make it 1.5 and try and run that, see what happens. It's taking a long time to come back. Interestingly, maybe we just let it run in the background. Not sure if I've killed everything. Ah, here we go. And we get a completely different result that comes back. It does look Pythonic to an extent. Or maybe I should take that back. It doesn't fully look Pythonic. There's a $sign in here that would never come about. And this for loop isn't created properly, so unsatisfactory. Let's just take it to 0.8 and see what happens. That's kind of like, you know, where their recommended value was. And then we get something back slightly different again. 2048, let's try that, control return. So 1025, just doubled that. So this seems to be what it's coming back with, and it's losing its indentation. Using the correct indentation. And by the way, the comparison of this, if I was to, so if I take this out of here, and in fact I probably already got it, so if I take this out of here and pull the ChatGPT into here, and I did, you know, this is exactly the same. I'll do a zoom in. Let's see. Let's zoom in. This was the exact same of code, the exact same prompt that we put in, and it's catching the correct indentation here. So it wasn't in our code. It's a copy code, and that would we could then paste that little block of code and test it in. So it's running there, but not in one, but not in the other. What else do we have? I wonder what the stop thing is, if it's there. I don't see a suffix as well. Suffix string optional. That suffix comes after the completion of the inserted text. Okay, so something comes after the inserted text. N, we have N in there, and it's pretty undescriptive. It's just N, and it's an integer, and if we didn't have it in there, it would default to 1. It says it over here defaults to 1. I might zoom in because I know that sometimes this isn't. Let's zoom in as much as I can, just so. Ooh, I probably over zoomed now. But it was just down here, N, how many completions to generate for each prompt, basically. And it defaults to 1. Note, because this parameter generates many completions, it can quickly consume your token quota. So don't make that maximum too high. Don't make that number too high. Use carefully and ensure that you have reasonable settings for max tokens and stop. and I noticed that my stop value is set to be none, so presumably that doesn't stop, and I wonder if there's a stop in here, and stop. So stop up to so it's a string array, and it defaults to null, or in Python that would be none, up to 4 sequences where the API will stop generating further tokens. So the returned text will not contain the stop sequence. So there's some kind of stopping thing in there. I'm just wondering if I should set it like 4, or if that's what it does. Sorry, it does up to 4 anyway. So presumably, unless you forced it to do more, then it wouldn't. And I think that's pretty much it. There was the part about the engine, but I don't see that necessarily in here. Then there's other things as well, like frequency penalty and other arguments that you could put in. So it's really a case of going to the actual documentation itself and sort of like having an attempt at running that. I'm going to move this back down to 0.5. I'll move this back down to 1.4. I'll keep the text all the same, and I'll just rerun it. But we get this back that comes from it, and I guess the first question is what is completions? And I can sort of like take a look at this and paste into here and just run completions, and we can see here like what is this completions, and we get store. I pull out this store, what I call story, which is a bunch of text. I pull out this story, and this story is completions dot choices in brackets. So it's kind of like I've extracted this array and then get the text. But what it actually is, and if I go to the Jupyter variables part, is it just says that completions, like what is the type of completions? Completions is an openai object. So I guess it's of class. It's a class completion, and it belongs to this openai module. So it's this openai object. But I go here. This is oops. Where did I get to there? Let's just get that back. There. I think change presentation, and I don't want to do that. Let's just rerun that. Completion. Just run it again. Okay. Because I think I double click. I probably shrunk it by clicking on that. I go here, so I do completions, and then choices, and choices looks like it's the first key, because there's a bunch of keys and values. It's because it's scrolled across, actually, that's what it's done. There's a bunch of keys and values in here, so what it's returning looks like a dictionary. That's effectively what it's returning. So I'm looking at the items in the dictionary, and here's another item in the dictionary. So this dictionary contains a list, effectively, and I'm going into this list, and I pull out choices, and over here, and then 0, but I'm not actually seeing. I was expecting to see the text in. The text is actually in here because it's choices, and then it's the first argument or the first element of the list, because it's 0, index number 0. Well, there's only one index in this list, and that's actually a dictionary. So inside of here you've got this dictionary, and it's and then actually inside this dictionary we've got the text. So that's kind of like what it's looking at, and maybe there's another way, but what you see here is, and this is probably why the white spaces aren't coming out, it's just got some forward slashes. I'd expect that maybe to be forward tabs or something, or actually see white spaces in there. So that's kind of like why it's missing out, this white space. But all of this stuff here is actually the text that came back over here, basically. So that's what's coming out of it. So you can sort of like get that. And we've got like presumably this is an epoch time, so the time since yeah, and you could probably convert it to a real like date time. There's probably the number of seconds since like 1970. That's what an epoch time is. It's got an ID. That's probably some sort of unique reference number by the looks of it. Then it pulls back our model, but we saw the Da Vinci model here already, so it's got the model. And then it's got some other bits, and it actually tells us, okay, usage, how much we've used. So this is how many tokens that we've expired. Again, I don't know what the maximum number of tokens that we're allowed to use. It's got prompt tokens and then total tokens, and it looks like the total number of tokens is the sum of these two. So that's probably like our net usage to the system. And if you are a not paid for user, and probably even if you are a paid for user, there's a certain amount of tokens that you can use. So it's kind of like a deeper dive into the OpenAI. I wonder if there's anything else that I could sort of like show or go into, but I don't think so. I could. Just going to try and do a Control F and look for engines. So we do have engines in here, but it's a separate component by the looks of it, because engines. I wonder if engines. The engines data points are deprecated. Okay, so that doesn't exist. Because we've got engines as one of the arguments in here. Oh, so we've got engine as one of the arguments, not engines. So look at engine, but that's not that, not that, not that, not that. But there is a list of engines by the looks of it over here, and so I guess we could try those and try the different types of engines. Engine ID2, engine ID3. So I'm wondering what they are. But there are a few different versions of those, at least from what we can see. And that's kind of like, oh, here we go. And this is that's a Text DaVinci 003. I'm using Text DaVinci 002. So again, it looks like it's something that the user needs to go into and get an understanding of. Some of these are already depreciated. In terms of the engines will have certain behaviors, so I'm just kind of like blindly using one that was given, but there might be more suitable or better ones, and that's basically how it looks like it works. That's kind of like an inner view of the OpenAI module and how it works. And yeah, sadly I couldn't get the indentation working on it. But I did have it working in other ones, but yeah, it seems a bit random for that. And that's it. That's how OpenAI works with Python, and we could do a Node.js version, but it's how it works with Python.